Cole had been fixing engines since he was 14 years old. Back on Earth, he worked on old cars in his uncle's garage. Now, 20 years later, he fixed starship engines in the cold darkness between galaxies. The machines were different, but the work was the same. Find the broken part, fix it, move on to the next problem. He lay on his back beneath the secondary power unit of the drifter's run, his hands covered in black grease that smelled like burnt copper. Above him, the pipes hummed and clicked as the ship moved through space. It was not a beautiful ship. It was old, patched together, and always breaking down, but it was the only home had known for 2 years. The rest of the crew did not think of him as family. He knew this. He had always known this. Captain was a tall reptile with green scales and yellow eyes that never blinked. He looked at the way a person might look at a bug crawling across their food. The other crew members were not much better. There was the pilot, whose 4 arms moved too fast for human eyes to follow. There was the cargo master, a round creature covered in thick gray fur who spoke in grunts and clicks. None of them trusted. None of them liked him. Humans had a bad reputation in this part of the galaxy. Other species thought they were unpredictable, emotional, dangerous. Had spent 2 years proving that he was reliable and calm, but it never seemed to matter. He was human, and that was enough to make him an outsider. The ship shook hard and nearly hit his head on the pipe above him. He slid out from under the power unit and stood up, wiping his hands on his worn gray pants. "What was that?" he asked out loud, but no one was there to answer. He walked to the nearest window and looked outside. His stomach dropped. Below the ship was a planet. It was brown and orange, covered in thick jungle that stretched from horizon to horizon. Dark clouds swirled above the trees like angry spirits. Did not recognize the planet, but something about it made his skin crawl. The ship's communication system crackled to life. Captain's cold voice filled the corridor. "All crew to the cargo bay. We are making an emergency landing on 7. There is damage to the outer hull that must be repaired before we can continue." 7 felt ice form in his chest. Every spacer knew that name. It was a death world, one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. The atmosphere had pockets of poison gas that could kill in seconds. The plants were full of toxins, and somewhere in those endless jungles lived had heard the stories. There was an apex predator, the top of the food chain on a planet where everything was trying to kill everything else. It was massive, fast, and smart. Dozens of research teams had landed on 7 over the years. None of them had come back. The planet was quarantined now. No one was supposed to land there. But here they were, descending through the orange clouds. The landing was rough. The ship hit the ground hard and had to grab a wall to keep from falling. When the engines finally stopped, the silence was strange and heavy. Even through the metal walls could hear sounds from outside, clicks and hisses, things moving through the trees. Captain gathered the crew in the cargo bay. His yellow eyes swept over them without warmth. "The damage is on the outer hull," he said. "It must be repaired before we can leave. The human will do this work." Looked up outside, alone. "You are the engineer," said. "This is your job." There was something in the captain's voice that did not like, something hidden, but he had no choice. He was the engineer. This was his job. He put on his work suit and gathered his tools. The airlock opened with a hiss, and he stepped out onto the surface of 7. The air was thick and warm, like breathing through a wet blanket. The trees were massive, reaching up so high that could not see their tops. Strange flowers glowed with soft blue and green light. It would have been beautiful if it was not so terrifying. He found the damage quickly. A small hole in the hull, probably from space debris. It would take an hour to fix, maybe less. He got to work, trying to ignore the sounds coming from the jungle around him. He was halfway done when he heard voices. They came from inside the ship, muffled but clear enough to understand. Stopped working and pressed his ear against the hull. "Leave now, before it gets dark." That was the pilot. His voice was nervous. "The human is still outside, that was." "That is the point." Captain spoke slowly, like he was explaining something to a child. "We leave him here. When we return to port, we report that he was killed during the emergency landing. The insurance company pays us his death benefit. It is more money than he would earn in 10 years of work." His blood turned to ice. "But he will die here," said. "Yes," replied, "that is the point." Stumbled back from the hull. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. This could not be happening. They could not leave him here. He had served them faithfully for 2 years. He had fixed every problem, worked every long shift, never complained. None of that mattered. He ran toward the airlock, but he was too late. The ship's engines roared to life, sending a wave of hot air that knocked him to the ground. He looked up, dirt in his eyes, and watched the drifters rise into the orange sky. "Wait," he screamed, "please." The ship did not stop. It climbed higher and higher until it was just a dark spot against the clouds. Then it disappeared and was alone. He sat in the dirt for a long time. Around him the jungle clicked and hissed and moved. The sun was setting and the shadows between the trees were growing darker. He had no food, no shelter, no weapon, just his repair kit and the clothes on his back. Somewhere in the darkness something moved, something big. Stood up slowly. His legs were shaking, but he forced himself to think. Panic would kill him faster than anything else on this planet. He was an engineer. He solved problems. This was just another problem. A sound came from the jungle. It was low and deep, like thunder rolling across a distant mountain. But it was not thunder. It was a growl. There was hunting. And Cole was the prey, ran. He did not know where he was going, but he knew that standing still meant death. The growl came again, closer this time, and he pushed his legs to move faster. The trees were thick and their roots twisted out of the ground like giant snakes. Tripped twice but forced himself back up each time. Behind him he could hear something crashing through the jungle. It was big, it was fast, and it was getting closer. He saw a tree ahead with a large hole in its trunk, about 10 feet off the ground. Without thinking, he jumped, grabbed a low branch and pulled himself up. His arms burned with effort, but fear gave him strength. He climbed into the hollow and pressed himself against the back wall, trying to make himself as small as possible. The crashing sound stopped. Held his breath. His heart was beating so loud he was sure the whole planet could hear it. Through a crack in the wood, he could see the ground below. Something moved out of the shadows. It was bigger than he had imagined. It was the size of a small truck, with 6 powerful legs and a body covered in black scales that seemed to drink in the fatting light. Its head was long and narrow, filled with teeth that looked like curved knives. But the worst part was its eyes. They were completely black, like holes in the universe, and they saw everything. The creature walked slowly around the base of the tree. It lifted its head and sniffed the air. Then it looked up, directly at the hollow where it was hiding. For a long moment they stared at each other, man and monster, prey and predator. Then it turned and walked away into the darkness. Did not move for hours. He stayed in the hollow until the sun rose, sending orange light through the jungle canopy. Only then did he allow himself to breathe normally. He was alive. He did not understand why, but he was alive. The next few days were the hardest of his life. Had no survival training. He was an engineer, not a soldier or an explorer, but he was smart and he refused to give up. First, he needed clean air. The planet's atmosphere had pockets of toxic spores that could destroy his lungs in minutes. He tore a strip from his undershirt and used parts from his repair kit to create a simple filter mask. It was not perfect, but it would keep him breathing. Next, he needed water. He found a stream on the second day, but he was not foolish enough to drink from it right away. He built a small fire using his repair tool's spark function and boiled the water in a metal container from his kit. The water tasted strange, but it did not kill him. Food was harder. He watched the animals to see what they ate. The small creatures avoided certain plants, so he avoided them too. He found a fruit that looked like a purple apple. He cut it open and smelled it. He touched a tiny piece to his tongue and waited. When nothing bad happened after an hour, he ate a small bite. When he was still alive the next morning, he ate more. By the fourth day, had a routine. He woke at sunrise, gathered food and water, and worked on improving his shelter. He moved to a small cave he found near the stream, covering the entrance with branches and leaves. It was not comfortable, but it was safe. He never stopped watching for them. Sometimes he caught glimpses of it in the distance, a shadow moving between the trees, but it never attacked, it just watched. On the fifth day, everything changed. Was gathering fruit when he heard a sound he had never heard before. It was a high, sharp cry, full of pain and anger. He knew he should ignore it. He should go back to his cave and hide, but something made him move toward the sound instead. He found in a small clearing. The great predator was lying on its side, one of its back legs caught in something that looked like a giant plant. Thick green vines had wrapped around the leg and were slowly tightening, cutting into the black scales. There was bleeding, its blood a dark purple color that stained the ground. The creature saw and tried to stand, but the trap held it down. It snarled, showing all its terrible teeth. Every instinct in its body screamed at him to run. This was the monster that had killed hundreds of trained soldiers and scientists. It would tear him apart in seconds. But did not run. He looked at his eyes, those deep black pools, and he saw something there. Not rage, not hunger, pain, fear. The creature was trapped and scared, just like it had been when he first landed on this planet. "Easy," said softly. "I am not going to hurt you." The growled, but it did not snap at him. Walked slowly, keeping his hands visible. His heart was pounding, but his voice stayed calm. "I know you are scared. I am scared too, but I can help you if you let me." He reached the creature's trapped leg. The vines were thick and covered in small thorns. Pulled out his cutting tool and began to work, slicing through the vines one at a time. The watched him with those black eyes, perfectly still. It took 20 minutes to cut the creature free. When the last vine fell away, the stood up slowly. Its injured leg shook but held its weight. It turned to face, and for a terrible moment he thought it would kill him. Instead, the creature leaned forward and sniffed his face. Its breath was hot and smelled like copper. Then it pulled back, looked at him one more time, and limped away into the jungle. Sat down on the ground, his whole body shaking. He did not know why he had done that. It was stupid. It was crazy. Any other being in the galaxy would have let the monster die. But was human, and humans had been making friends with predators since the beginning of time. That night he returned to his cave and tried to sleep. He woke to a sound outside, a soft thump, like something being dropped on the ground. He grabbed his tool and crawled to the entrance. In front of his cave was a dead animal. It was about the size of a pig with 4 legs and blue fur. Its neck was broken, a quick and clean kill. Looked up. The sat at the edge of the clearing, its black eyes reflecting the light of the moons. It watched him for a long moment. Then it turned and disappeared into the darkness without making a sound. Looked at the dead animal, then at the place where the creature had been. "Thank you," he whispered to the empty jungle. He did not know if they could understand him, but he had a feeling that it did. 3 weeks passed on 7, and Cole was still alive. He should have been dead 100 times by now. The planet had tried to kill him with its toxic air, its poisonous plants, and its endless predators. But every day he woke up breathing. Every night he fell asleep with a full stomach. And every morning he found fresh kills waiting outside his cave. There was watching over him. At first only saw the creature from a distance. It would appear at the edge of the jungle, silent as smoke, and then disappear before he could blink. But as the days passed, it came closer. It sat in the clearing while gathered water. It followed him when he searched for fruit. It was always there, a massive shadow at the corner of his vision. Began talking to it. He knew the creature probably could not understand his words, but the sound of his own voice helped him feel less alone. "Good morning," he would say when he saw those black eyes watching him. "Did you sleep well?" The never answered, of course, but it stopped growling when he spoke. It stopped showing its teeth. One day, when was sitting by the stream eating breakfast, the creature walked out of the trees and sat down 10 feet away from him. His heart jumped, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Hello there," he said softly. "It is nice to finally meet you properly." The creature tilted its head, studying him. Then it lay down on the ground and closed its eyes. It was sleeping. The deadliest predator on one of the deadliest planets in the galaxy was taking a nap in front of him. Laughed, he could not help it. The situation was so strange, so impossible, that laughter was the only response that made sense. "I think I will call you Shadow," he said. "Is that okay with you?" Shadow opened one black eye, looked at him, and then went back to sleep. From that day forward, they were never apart. Learned many things about Shadow in the following weeks. The creature was not cold-blooded like scientists had believed. Its scales were warm to the touch, almost hot like the skin of a dog with a fever. When finally worked up the courage to touch Shadow for the first time, he felt a heart beating beneath those black scales. It was fast and strong, the heart of a hunter. Shadow was also intelligent, much more intelligent than any animal had known on Earth. The creature understood commands, not just words, but tones and gestures. When pointed at something, Shadow would look in that direction. When raised his hand, Shadow would stop moving. When made a soft clicking sound with his tongue, Shadow would come to him. It was like training a dog, but a dog, the size of a truck with teeth like swords. Thought about this often, especially at night when Shadow lay beside him in the cave, its warm body keeping him safe from the cold. Humans had been doing this for thousands of years. Wolves became dogs. Wild cats became horses, birds, even snakes. Humans looked at dangerous animals and saw something that others did not. They saw potential friends. Other species in the galaxy could not understand this. When they saw a predator, they saw only danger. They ran or they fought. They never considered that there might be a third option. But humans were different. Humans reached out their hands and said, "Would you like to be my friend?" Most of the time, the predator said no. Sometimes, the predator bit off the hand. But every once in a while, something magical happened. A bond formed. Trust was built. And two creatures who should have been enemies became partners instead. Believed this was humanity's greatest gift. Not technology, not intelligence. The ability to love things that should not be loved. With Shadow's help, life on Seven became almost comfortable. The great predator protected from other dangers. Creatures that would have attacked a lone human ran away when they saw Shadow. Hunting became easy. Shadow would bring down prey and would cook it over a fire. They shared meals together like old friends. Also found ways to help Shadow. He used tools from his repair kit to remove parasites from the creature's scales. He cleaned and treated the old wound on Shadow's leg until it healed completely. He built a larger shelter, big enough for both of them to sleep inside when the rains came. One night during a terrible storm, Shadow pressed close to and made a sound he had never heard before. It was low and soft, almost like purring. Put his arm around the creature's neck and held on tight. "I am glad I found you," he said quietly, "or I guess you found me." Shadow made the purring sound again. For the first time since landing on this planet, felt something that surprised him. He felt happy, not relieved or grateful or lucky. Happy. This death world with its toxic air and endless dangers had become his home, and this monster, this legendary killer, had become his family. He was not sure he ever wanted to leave. But the universe had other plans. On the 42nd day, was gathering water from the stream when he heard a sound that did not belong. It was a roar, deep and mechanical. He looked up at the orange sky and saw a dark shape breaking through the clouds. A ship. Shadow appeared at his side, growling at the thing in the sky, put a hand on the creature's neck to calm it. "Easy," he said. "Let us see who it is first." He watched the ship descend toward the planet's surface, and a cold feeling spread through his chest. He recognized that ship. He would recognize it anywhere. It was the Drifter's Run. Captain had come back. Looked at Shadow, and Shadow looked back at him. In those black eyes saw a question. What do we do now? Thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the abandonment, the weeks of fighting to survive. He thought about the crew that had left him to die on this planet without a second thought. Then he smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I think it is time," he said to Shadow, "for them to meet you." Shadow's lips pulled back, showing rows of sharp teeth. It was not a kind smile either. The Drifter's Run landed in a clearing about 2 miles from his cave. He watched from the shadows of the jungle as the ship touched down, its engines kicking up clouds of dirt and dead leaves. Beside him, Shadow crouched low to the ground, perfectly still, invisible in the darkness between the trees. The airlock opened, and figures began to step out onto the surface. Captain came first, his green scales catching the orange light. He held a weapon in his clawed hands, his yellow eyes scanning the jungle with obvious fear. Behind him came the four-armed pilot and the round gray creature who served as cargo master. They were all armed. They were all nervous. But there was someone new with them. She was tall and thin, with blue skin and large silver eyes. Her clothing was formal, not the rough work gear of a cargo crew. She carried a small device in her hands that she used to scan the area. Did not recognize her species, but he recognized her type. She was some kind of official. He moved closer, staying hidden, until he could hear their voices. "This is 7, the blue-skinned woman said. Her voice was calm and professional. "A quarantined death world. Why exactly did your crew member die here?" "It was an accident," Captain said. His voice was smooth but could hear the lie beneath it. "We had engine trouble and were forced to make an emergency landing. Our engineer, a human named Cole, was killed during the repairs. A predator attacked him before we could help." "I see," the woman made a note on her device. "And you found the body." "There was no body left to find," said. "The creatures here are very thorough." "Then how do you know he is dead?" His tail twitched with annoyance. "He was attacked by a, no one survives an attack by a, everyone knows this." The woman nodded slowly. "Then you will not mind if we search the area. Galactic insurance law requires visual confirmation of death or recovery of remains for all Class A claims. You are asking for a very large payment, Captain. My company wants to be sure." Smiled in the shadows. So that was why they had returned. Not to rescue him, but to confirm his death so they could collect the insurance money. And this blue woman was making sure they were not lying. He appreciated the irony. The same greed that had made them abandon him was now forcing them to come back. Ordered his crew to spread out and search the jungle. They moved slowly, jumping at every sound, pointing their weapons at every shadow. Watched them stumble through the underbrush like scared children. They had no idea what they were doing. They were used to the safety of their ship, not the dangers of a death world. Looked at Shadow and made a small gesture with his hand. The great predator understood immediately. Without a sound, it slipped away into the trees. The hunt began. The first sign of trouble came an hour later. Was searching near the stream when his communicator crackled with static. He looked down at it, confused, and when he looked up again, all his equipment was gone. His backup weapon, his scanner, his survival pack. All of it had vanished without a trace. "What is happening?" he shouted into his communicator. "Something took my gear." "Calm down," snapped back. It was probably just a small animal. But was not calm. He ran back toward the ship as fast as his short legs could carry him. Was next. He was examining the entrance to his cave when he heard something behind him. He spun around, all four arms raised and ready to fight, but there was nothing there, just trees and shadows. He took a deep breath to steady himself. Then he heard the growl. It came from everywhere at once, a low rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate in his bones. Had never heard anything like it. He did not want to hear it again. He dropped his weapon and ran, screaming into his communicator about monsters in the dark. Back at the ship, the blue-skinned woman watched all of this with growing interest. Her silver eyes missed nothing. She saw how the crew panicked. She saw how their stories did not quite fit together. She saw how Captain was sweating despite the cool air. "Your crew seems very frightened," she observed, "for a planet they have supposedly visited before." "Thee is a dangerous creature," said defensively. "Fear is appropriate." "Of course," the woman made another note, "I am simply observing." Night fell on 7, and the real terror began. Shadows circled the crew's camp in the darkness, always moving, never visible for more than a heartbeat. Its cries echoed through the jungle, bouncing off the trees so that no one could tell where they came from. The crew huddled together near the ship, weapons pointed outward, but they could not shoot what they could not see. Watched from a safe distance, he felt no sympathy for them. These were the people who had left him to die alone on a hostile planet. They had thrown away his life like garbage because they wanted money. They deserved to feel some fear. But he was not cruel. He did not want them dead. He just wanted them to understand what they had done. The night lasted forever. None of the crew slept. By the time the sun rose, they were exhausted and terrified, jumping at every sound, seeing threats in every shadow. Had locked himself inside the ship and refused to come out. Sat against the hull, rocking back and forth and muttering about invisible monsters. Captain tried to maintain control, but even his cold confidence was cracking. His yellow eyes were wide, and his claws kept clenching and unclenching. "We need to leave," he said to the blue woman. "We have searched long enough. The human is clearly dead." "We have found no evidence of that," the woman replied calmly. "No bones, no clothing, no equipment. Your engineer has simply vanished. They ate everything. There is nothing left." Perhaps, the woman's silver eyes narrowed, or perhaps there is another explanation. At that moment decided the game was over. He had made his point. Now it was time to face them. He stepped out of the jungle with Shadow at his side. The reaction was immediate, screamed. Watching through the ship's window, fainted. Captain raised his weapon with shaking hands, but he was too shocked to fire. The blue woman simply stared, her silver eyes wide with amazement. Stood in the morning light, dirty and bearded but very much alive. Beside him, the most dangerous predator in the galaxy sat calmly like a trained dog waiting for a command. "Hello," Captain said. His voice was steady. "You look surprised to see me." His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The blue woman stepped forward slowly, her device already recording. "You are Cole, the engineer who was declared dead." "The same," looked at with cold eyes, "though the report of my death was, as you can see, greatly exaggerated." Shadow growled softly, and the entire crew took a step back. Smiled. "Now then, I think we need to have a conversation about what really happened here." Found his voice first. His fear turned to anger and his grip on his weapon tightened. "Kill them," he ordered his crew. "Kill the human and the beast." But did not move. Was still unconscious inside the ship. Was alone, facing a monster from legend and the human he had left to die. "I would not do that," said calmly. "Shadow is very fast, faster than any weapon you have ever seen." As if to prove the point, Shadow moved. One moment the great predator was sitting beside. The next moment it was on top of, pinning him to the ground with one massive paw. The captain's weapon flew from his hand and landed in the dirt. His yellow eyes went wide with pure terror. But Shadow did not bite. It did not scratch. It just held down, those black eyes staring into his soul. "You see," said, walking slowly toward the fallen captain, "Shadow only kills when I ask. And right now I am not asking." The blue woman stepped forward, her recording device capturing everything. Her silver eyes were bright with interest. "This is extraordinary," she said. "In 200 years of study, no one has ever successfully approached a. You have done more than approach one. You have tamed it." "I did not tame Shadow," replied. "We became friends. There is a difference." The woman nodded slowly, understanding something important. "Yes, I think there is." She turned to look at, still pinned beneath Shadow's paw. Her professional mask slipped for a moment, showing disgust beneath. "Captain," she said formally, "my name is. I am a senior investigator for the Galactic Insurance Coalition. Based on what I have witnessed and recorded, I have reason to believe that you filed a fraudulent death claim. Furthermore, I believe you deliberately abandoned a crew member on a quarantined planet with intent to cause his death." Tried to speak, but Shadow pressed down slightly, and he could only wheeze. "These are serious crimes," continued. "Insurance fraud carries a sentence of 5 years in a rehabilitation colony. Attempted murder of a crew member under contract is punishable by up to 20 years. Violation of quarantine protocol adds another 5. She smiled without warmth. "You are going to prison for a very long time, Captain." Felt something ease in his chest. Not joy exactly, more like relief. He had not known what he wanted until this moment. He did not want revenge. He did not want dead. He just wanted justice. He wanted the captain to face the consequences of what he had done. Spoke into her communicator, calling for a security vessel to come and collect the prisoners. Then she turned to with a different expression on her face, something like respect. "You are going to be famous, you know," she said. "The human who survived 7 and befriended a. Scientists will want to study you. News networks will want to interview you. Your story will spread across the galaxy." Shrugged, "I was just trying to survive." "That is what makes it remarkable." Looked at Shadow, who had stepped off and returned to side. "Other species see predators and think only of danger. Humans see potential. You looked at the most dangerous creature on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy and thought, maybe we can be friends." "It is in our nature," said simply. "We have been doing it for thousands of years." 3 hours later, a security vessel arrived and took and into custody. The drifter's run was impounded as evidence. Watched them go without anger. They were not worth his anger anymore. Offered him a ride to any system he wanted. He could return to Earth. He could go to one of the major space stations and start fresh. With his new fame, he would have no trouble finding work. "There is just one problem," said. "I am not leaving without Shadow." Frowned. "The creature is a protected species on a quarantined world. Removing it would violate a dozen regulations." "Then I will stay here." They looked at each other for a long moment. His face was calm but determined. He had spent 42 days on this planet. He had nearly died 100 times. He had found a companion who had saved his life and given him purpose. He was not going to abandon Shadow the way had abandoned him. Sighed, "You humans are very stubborn." "Yes," agreed, "we are." She was silent for a while, thinking. Then she made a decision. "The quarantine is meant to protect visitors from the," she said slowly. "But if the is no longer on the planet, there is no need for protection. I could classify this as a voluntary relocation of a single specimen for the purpose of behavioral study." She looked at Shadow. "As long as you take full responsibility for its actions." Smiled for the first time in weeks. "I accept full responsibility." 3 months later, a small cargo ship called the Second Chance flew through the outer systems of the galaxy. It was not a beautiful ship, but it was well maintained and fast. At the controls sat Cole, now famous across 100 worlds as the man who befriended the. In a custom-built compartment behind the cockpit, Shadow slept peacefully. The great predator had adapted to ship life better than anyone expected. It still needed regular exercise, which provided by taking jobs on wild planets where Shadow could hunt. But it was content to sleep during the long trips between stars, waking only when called. They were partners now. More than that, they were family. His communication panel lit up with an incoming message. He pressed the button to receive it. A face appeared on the screen. It was a species with purple skin and large black eyes. She looked worried. "Is this Cole?" she asked, the human with the... "Speaking. My name is Director. I work for the Galactic Research Foundation. We have a team stranded on a planet called 5. There are creatures there that no one has ever successfully approached. They have our team surrounded. We cannot extract them without making contact with the creatures." Leaned forward. "What kind of creatures?" "We do not know. No one has ever gotten close enough to study them. Everyone who tries gets killed." Director paused. "You are the only person in the galaxy who has ever turned a deadly predator into an ally. We need someone who can think differently. Someone who might find a way to communicate where others have failed." Thought about his life before 7. He had been an engineer fixing machines in the darkness between stars. It was good work, honest work, but it was not special. Now he was something new. He was a bridge between species, a person who saw friendship where others saw only danger. This was his purpose. This was what humans could offer the galaxy. Not weapons or technology, but understanding, compassion, the strange and wonderful ability to reach out a hand to things that should be feared. "What is the pay?" he asked. "Minimal," Director admitted. "We have spent most of our budget on failed rescue attempts." Smiled. Behind him, Shadow woke up and made a curious sound. "We will do it anyway," said. "Send me the coordinates." He ended the call and turned to look at Shadow. The great predator's black eyes reflected the stars visible through the cockpit window. "Ready for another adventure?" asked. Shadow yawned, showing rows of sharp teeth, and stretched its massive body. Laughed and set a new course. Somewhere in the galaxy, people were telling stories about him. The human who survived a death world. The man who befriended a monster. They said he was brave. They said he was crazy. They said he was unique. But knew the truth. He was not special. He was just human. And humans had been making friends with predators since the beginning of time. It was in their nature. The second chance jumped to hyperspace, carrying a man and his monster toward their next impossible adventure. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the legend of Cole continued to grow.